what is your why? It's not burial. So the inflation stuff's interesting, but it's not as uniquely relevant that much more. And now we've got a whole new angle to start off. So if you run into this, again, the same line, the fundamental nature of asking questions still applies. Okay, so you're all set with the burial, is what you're saying, or cremation, Mr. Ruspel. But what you're saying is you need to take care of that mortgage. God forbid you die earlier than expected. Okay, right? Yeah. Okay. So my question is, so what is driving you to believe this is important to you, right? So now we need to dig deep into that. So why do you want to cover your mortgage? What are you looking to accomplish? What happens if you die tomorrow or the next year or two and you don't have a policy to cover your mortgage? What happens to your house? What happens to your family? We need to, again, just like we walk them through the pain of dying without funeral planning and a final expense plan, walk them through the process of dying without having a policy to protect their mortgage, losing their home, their kids getting out of the house. He's lost a wife. He's down to a single income, right? So my point is that long story short, this is a situation where we've got to take him through that pain of what happens if you don't do something today. Does that make sense, everybody? Kind of just a fundamental nature of how we sell any kind of life insurance product. And it doesn't matter if it's for mortgage protection or final expense. It's still, the nature is the same. Tell me the pain of what happens if you're not prepared. Okay. A side note here. You want to ask about what their existing mortgage is, how long they got to pay for it. I would advise you, if they're over 60, because this doesn't happen all the time, but it will. If they're over 60, I really discourage you from selling them term. It's probably not going to get approved. Okay. What you want to sell instead is a whole life plan. And I would call it, or I would sell it as we call it an equity protection program. Here's a real quick overview how that works. Let's say they owe $150,000 on the house, right? If you try to get them $150,000 in final expense, it's just going to be 60 plus through the roof, right? So what most people will want instead, if they can't cover the mortgage, they'll want enough to cover the mortgage payments for a number of years. We call this the equity protection program. And the idea behind it is simple. Whoever is gifted or given the house when they die, the policy pays out to that beneficiary. And the idea is they use the money from that policy to pay the mortgage for a year, 2 years, 3 years, whatever it may be. That buys that person time to prepare the house. Maybe it's a dump. I don't know. Maybe it's just in ill condition, to prepare it, to get it ready to sell, and to then profit from the proceeds of the sale, right? As opposed to what if the family doesn't have money and the person dies, right? The insured dies and they can't keep the mortgage up. The house goes into foreclosure. You can't sell the thing and you've lost the accumulated equity. I think about how houses have gone up through the roof in the past couple of years, right? That's an equity gain, right? On paper. You can't realize that when you can't keep the notes up, right, on the house. So the strategy here is to sell them a $10,000, $20,000, $25,000 policy, typically pays the mortgage for a couple of years maximally, and buys time for the beneficiary to get the house listed and sold, then to get that big chunk of change from the proceeds of the sale of the home. So if you hear mortgage protection, what I've described today is the pitch. That's the sales opportunity. Protect the equity in it, to buy time for the survivor to pay it off. Okay.